Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to today's webinar. During the next hour, we will present the challenges and the potential of the Indian market and the ProTerra smallholders interpretation. The webinar was organized together with ADM and Solidaridad. And we will start with a brief intro and explain how the ProTerra Indian interpretation works. Then ADM, who actually uses that interpretation also in India, will explain more about the Indian market and their activities in India. After which, Beatrix from Solidaridad will also represent and show us, explain a bit more about the challenges and project they have with ADM on the ground in India. And to close with, I will also explain you and tell you what we saw in the last few years as key challenges on the ground when we use this interpretation, and what issues and challenges we face during certification in India, after which we will have a time slot for Q&A. So we look forward to also having a great discussion at the end and answering your questions. But before we start, I would like to inform you about the logistics of the webinar. So you'll be put on mute to avoid any background noises, and please unmute yourself at the end when you ask your questions. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording and the presentation will be shared after. So don't worry if you miss it or you have to leave a bit earlier, we will share it all with you. And as mentioned, so please share your questions and ideas at the end. We will have, as you see, and also in the agenda, a time slot for that too. But very briefly, let me introduce ourselves if you're not familiar with the ProTerra Foundation. So we are a non-profit organization located in the Netherlands. It's an organization that promotes sustainability at all levels of the feed and food production system. And the ProTerra Foundation owns and continuously develops the ProTerra standard, which is a global multi-crop sustainability non-GMO standard that covers all crucial areas of responsible supply. To also see what we're talking about today, so the ProTerra Foundation has certification activities in different crops in many countries of the world. With green, you can see where we are working today. More specifically today, we will focus more on soy. However, the challenges and the lessons learned that we will explain during the webinar can be also applied to any crop in the smallholder reality, especially in India. In terms of soy, you can see also where ProTerra Foundation is more active. As you can also see, 2021, there was a significant decrease in certification, especially due to the national decrease of non-GMO in Brazil. A growing area is sugarcane worldwide, because it is more and more important for the food and beverage sectors, and an increasing number of certifications take place also in the sugarcane sector. The certified material mainly come to the European Union that we see, but production areas are really everywhere worldwide. So let's start with understanding the reality and the background a bit better. Why is actually certification needed? So companies do face an increasing number of challenges and risks they have to deal with in their supply chains. Just to mention some examples, it's like land grabbing, social inequities, pesticide usage, and often raw materials are hidden and unfortunately often connected also to the issues I just mentioned. For example, ProTerra focuses on all the important challenges faced by the companies in their food and feed supply chains, particularly those dependent on the agricultural commodities. So this enables real action to create social, environmental, and economic benefits for everyone. But we have to also understand that no single mechanism in isolation can solve problems as complex as those posed within the raw material supply chains. Instead, a combination of direct supply chain approaches and whole system initiatives are needed. Certification forms a key part of this suite of mechanisms, addressing different challenges and being an enabler to some of the other mechanisms. For example, certification often goes beyond the minimum requirements for the actors within the system as defined by national legislation. It also can grant transparency, which enables companies to identify the origins of their raw materials and therefore identify better the countries and areas they would like to focus on. And also for an end user company, sustainably certified raw material means a clear reference for actually what is expected. It helps also in their discussions with their suppliers or their customers, because there are clear definitions. They have an increased knowledge of the origins of the products and within their direct supply chain. So they know better where's the biggest impact and scope for influence. They have also contributory evidence to demonstrate due diligence, and that has been undertaken within their own supply chain. So they do meet emerging due diligence requirements. And it also means a standard of environmentally, ethically responsible soy within their supply chain, which goes above the minimum requirements laid by national legislations. The ProTerra standard only certifies producers who meet requirements to address a spectrum of environmental and social issues, including deforestation and land conversion, biodiversity, farming practices, and labor practices. So what does it mean actually? It means that you can guarantee in your supply chain and towards your customers that you promote fair products, and also the users of the product can be sure that the products coming from a certified source have been produced fairly in a responsible way. We also have a number of companies that join the ProTerra network. This helps and enables them to create customer confidence, create a network, raise awareness, get more information, drive growth, and get global recognition. In the next few slides, I will give you a brief overview of the key aspects of the smallholder interpretation so that we can understand the connections and the logic in the development of this interpretation and why it was needed. ProTerra can be applied to raw materials and also to multi-ingredient products, such as, for example, chocolate milk. This may be accomplished using two basic approaches, which have an impact on the organization of the audit and also on the way an organization defines its internal system. We recognize that in many parts of the world, there is a real gap between the reality and the requirements of the standard. So therefore, we need regional interpretations and a continuous development approach to achieve that level that we would like to. And in this case, and in this concept, continuous improvement is an essential aspect of any regional interpretation. And in the ideal scenario, we aim that in the long run, companies do achieve a full alignment with the standard, the ProTerra standard as it is. We have four core aims and goals that have driven the development of the smallholders interpretation, and that is to foster good agricultural practices, to increase yield and quality of products, secure the supply of sustainably produced traceable and non-GM ingredients, protect the environment, and promote that workers and communities are treated with respect. In this way, regional interpretation aims at adjusting the ProTerra requirements to the smallholder market and operational reality in order to support the gradual alignment of the production of agricultural commodities with the ProTerra core aims. Because smallholder farms have a very important role. According to a study published in the World Development, 5 of every 6 farms in the world consist of less than 2 hectares. And the world's smallholder farmers produce around 1/3 of the world's food. Small farmers suffer particularly from climate change and world market fluctuations. Poor agricultural practices, uncontrolled agrochemical use, poor wastewater management or label conditions, and the lack of safe processing facilities have caused an increased concern around raw material production, especially in terms of responsible supply, biodiversity, and food safety. By following sustainable practices, farmers can significantly reduce the negative impacts on the environment. This means that a sustainable production of agricultural products becomes an important element in the diversified farmer livelihood strategy, strengthening smallholder households, economic resilience as well. And a few figures about the small soybean production in India, and then Stefan will explain that a bit more in detail. He's the expert today here. India is the fifth in terms of global soybean production, together with US, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and China. And also contributes, the soybean also contributes significantly to the edible oil pool. It contributes to around 40% of the total oilseeds today and 25% of the total oil production in the country. And you can see here the main production areas that are Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. And now that we understand a bit more why the ProTerra Indian interpretation or smallholders interpretation was created, it's also important to highlight some key aspects of this interpretation. So it's only applicable to smallholders. That is very important to mention. We defined for India the 2 hectares as a smallholder farming. We believe that this reflects the reality. So practically that means that the interpretation can be applicable to any agricultural property owned by an individual and a group of individuals that are less than 2 hectares. Because of the challenges, a reduced set of ProTerra indicators apply to the smallholders that grow step by step. I will explain this in a second a bit more. But it's also important to mention that all industry operators must fully comply with the ProTerra standard as it is. Back to that stepwise approach I just mentioned. So you have a reduced set of criteria that farmers have to achieve at the beginning when they start verification. And year by year, this number increases. An additional set of requirements must be met by the beginning of the 3rd year. And then all requirements have to be met fully at the end of the 5th year of certification. This means that they achieved the advanced level of the smallholder interpretation. And it doesn't mean that you have to really go through all 3 stages. It can happen that the farmer is more advanced and already at the initial certification has an intermediate or advanced level. The terms of definitions we use in the interpretations are the ones also used in the ProTerra standard, version 4.1, and also the certification protocol, and all other documents you can find on the website are applicable during certification. And of course, also a farm independently can certify, but what we see today in practice, it is usually the crushing plant that applies for certification, and under the scope of their certification, a verification of a sample of smallholder farms happen on the ground. We also have a specific sampling approach for the smallholders and for the smallholders interpretation. We will send out the links directly so you can see all what we just mentioned here also after the webinar. And with that, thank you so much. And I would like to pass the word to Stefan, who will explain us a bit more about ADM and the Indian market. Thank you, Stefan.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I assume you can all hear me, and if I produce a scrapping noise, just let me know, because there was some scrapping noises in between, so I hope everything is good now. Thanks for the invite today, Imasia and the ProTerra team, and the opportunity to speak and give a little bit of insight in the Indian market, but also about the ProTerra certification process we have done in India. My name is Stefan Ludwig. I'm the Customer Relationship Manager at ADM Europe. And in that role, I'm coordinating our European trading activities on on the non-GMO meal, which includes our European crush plants in Germany and Serbia, but also the import activities. And on the import side, I'm working closely with the ADM India team for many, many years. I'd like to give you an overview of the Indian footprint today, and then I'll talk a little bit about our ProTerra program, and we'll focus on markets. ADM is present in India since 25 years. We got over 1,700 employees, and we're operating in 3 major business segments, which is the agricultural services and the origination, which basically originates the crop from the farmers and does the processing. We got the human nutrition unit and the animal nutrition unit, and we are in various locations in India. We do operate 2 soybean crushing facilities. One is in Dawat and the other one in Latur. They are the green marked locations. And the Latur plant is the one where we have gone for the ProTerra certification in 2021. Next slide, please. We're operating around the full value chain. So we originate crops, we process crops, and we are also in the field of human nutrition and animal nutrition. And ADM India does work together with more than 300,000 farmers. And yes, you hear right, I mean 300,000. Whenever I talk about the Indian numbers, I have to look at them twice, but it's a huge country. It needs a lot of farmers to feed the country. And we do have smallholders. And the average farm size in India is 2 hectares, and the average soybean farmer does produce about 4 tons of soybeans. So if we imagine that we are shipping 25 or 50,000 ton parcels of meal, we need a lot of farmers to supply that. A big farm will be between 10 and 15 hectares, and they produce like 20 to 30 tons of beans. So it is a very interesting market out there, and luckily the ADM India team is very well connected to farmers and in the origination side. Now, besides the 300,000 farmers, we are working with 180 farm production organizations. I would say that's similar to co-ops. We operate 68 direct procurement centers, and in 21 we have sourced 60% of our soybeans directly from farms, and 10% from the co-ops there. We got 6,500 growers in our organic program, but I'll leave that to our partner Solidaridad, who will actually dive a little bit more into that. And we got a total of 25,000 farmers that are certified within or covered within our ProTerra certification. So next slide, please, Amasia. So the project location we've chosen is Maharashtra, where our Latur plant is operating in. And we have defined 3 districts: the district of Latur, Bid, and Osmanabad, where we work in 14 clusters with 39 procurement centers. And those 25,000 farmers are covering a total of 36,000 hectares of farmland. Now, of course, there's challenges out there. The farmers are family-run businesses, and we need to train them to learn the standards, to follow the documentation, to follow the standards, to track agro inputs, and also to keep farm diaries. And we're doing that with the help also of our partnerships. Next slide, please, Amasia. Where, for example, besides the partnership with Solidaridad, we have a partnership with Bayer on sustainable crop protection model. We got a partnership with Coromandel Fertilizers on soil nutrition management. The University College of Latur does help us with practices to reduce chemical usage. And we're also working together with local NGOs on water resources. And all of that helps us to basically be able to work in a sustainable manner, and also it helped a lot to implement the ProTerra program. So why did we decide to go for the ProTerra program? We are seeing that a lot of customers in Europe need sustainable soybean meal, and if we look at our European market, the market traditionally has been supplied by Brazil, and maybe you switch over to the next slide, where we just have a few numbers, but don't get sidetracked by that. The European market has traditionally been supplied by Brazil on non-GMO, and the Brazilian meal used to have the ProTerra standard, and I call it the gold standard and the Ferrari in some way. So once you had the ProTerra certification, you could easily import Brazilian meal, and today you wouldn't find any Brazilian meal, I think, in the European market without the ProTerra certification. So when we looked into India, India is a very opportunistic market for Europe, and people have been looking for similar certifications. So we decided in 21 that we have a go, and we basically get our plant certified to have another option for the European consumer. Now, as I said, the European markets usually get supplied by Brazil. We've learned already that the Brazilian production has been decreasing over the last years. At the same time, we have seen an increase in European soybean production, and India has always been around on the import side, and on purpose we took the 10 years of exports to Europe here, and we also on purpose split the months. So you see, we got years like 2015, 2016, where we got nearly no imports into Europe. And we got a year, for example, like 2021, when we had a very small Brazilian crop, where we suddenly had 660,000 tons of Indian imports into Europe, which helped supplying the European customer, and basically without the Indian production at the time, we couldn't have run the non-GMO programs in Europe. India produces a very good 50% high pro meal, which the European consumers do like and like to use in the past. Now, how does the Indian market work? The Indian harvest is in October, and that means if we see exports, they will be focused usually on the November, December, and in very tight years, we'll see Jan, Feb, March exports. The Indian crop is about 10 million tons this season, so we should have in theory plenty of opportunities for export. Whether we will see some this season or not, I don't know. It looks unlikely at the moment. 6 weeks ago, I would have said we very surely will see Indian imports, but time will tell. India is an adventure if it comes down to sourcing. The farmers will basically ship their beans to the mandi markets. Those beans will get transferred to the crusher. They all come in 50-kilo bags, believe it or not. Those bags get unbagged at the crushing plant. Then we process the beans, and guess what? All the meal will get bagged in 50-kilo bags again. So from the crushing plant, you will then truck the bags towards the train stations. The trains will send them to the export port, where again, the bags will be packed on a truck and they go to the warehouse where they get unbagged. So if you look at a typical cargo of 25,000 to 50,000 tons, it basically means we're moving about 500,000 to 1 million bags of soybean meal, and we touch those several times. So there's a lot of bag movement involved in India, which makes it very, very special, which also makes it important that you ensure you sieve the meal at loading. You're very carefully about the loading, and basically how it works is you do metal meshes over the ship holes, and you got fisher nets, and you'll ensure that no bag remains in the cargo. What's also very challenging on India is rules and regulations. So we've seen, especially in the last season, we've seen a lot of changes. the Indian government basically banned the trading of futures locally because they saw this the source of speculation. There is stock limits on how many beans can be held by certain entities. We see changes in the regulations plenty of times. For example, in 2021, India suddenly allowed the import of GMO meal, which then got a bit difficult on trading that. We got a system for import taxes, which protects the market, and there's a lot of challenges around the Indian market. But again, it's fun trading those markets, and India is a very good source for Europe whenever it fits. Now, whether it'll fit this season or not, I don't know, and time will tell us. So with that, I would give back to Amasia, and if there's any questions, you can contact me at any time, and obviously you can use the Q&A at the end of the session.
Many thanks, Stefan. Great. Yeah, you mentioned challenges and legislation. I think many ask themselves, okay, how do you deal with the upcoming EU deforestation fee challenges? But I think that would be a webinar probably for itself. There is still an intense debate on how smallholders can address the new upcoming changes. Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to pass on to Beatrix from Solidaridad, who will explain us a bit more about their project in India.
Okay, thanks very much, Amasia. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. So am I coming through clearly?
Yes, clear.
Okay, that's great. And thanks very much, Stefan, for your very interesting presentation. It's nice to get a very good strategic overview of the trade in India as well. I've been quite project focused, project delivery focused, so it's quite nice to get that sort of backup as well in terms of how things are panning out. So I'm going to talk to you about a program that we've got, which is a public-private partnership with the German Investment Corporation, and it's under the Develop Fund, and it started in around January 2021, and it's focused very much on the development of a sustainable and traceable supply chain for organic soybean in India, with the development objectives of improving farmer income and health as well. Next slide, please. So if you can see the map, we're looking at improved farming practices for 2,000 smallholders in 3 districts of the state of Karnataka, which is on the west, towards the west side of India. You can just see on the map there. So there are 3 districts, Haveri, Dharwad and Belgavi. And within those 3 districts, the farmer groups are clustered. So we build these different clusters for each district, and there's a varying number of clusters per district. And that's quite important for how we actually then formulate later structures for the project, which I'll come to. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So the project has 4 key work packages. And then it also has a number of cross-cutting themes as well across those work packages. The first one is farmer enrolment and the trainer of trainers program, and that's done by field executives. And we've established, so through those field executives, they establish a network of lead farmers, and we've got a network now of 200 lead farmers, and these are farmers that are early adopters of organic practices. And then we work with them to trial TraceNet, which is farmer diaries and the principle of setting up a record of daily activities on the farm, and that involves that enables them to undertake easy planning, monitoring, and management of all farming activities. Then under the second work package, we look at the development of farmer learning materials. So that's very much around the infrastructure that we need for the training programs. So that's the training facilities for the farmers, the development of information, education and communication materials, packaged up as IEC materials, and their translation, and then also training manuals, as well as the setting up of demonstration plots so that the farmers can see the trials and the work that's necessary in the field. Then the third work package is the preparation of the farmers for organic certification. And this preparation is done through the National Programme for Organic Production, which is an initiative that's run by the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, the Government of India. And we audit and certify against the standard that they use. So I think that gets us to roughly, well, so that I'll explain it later, but that gets us to year 3 in terms of the 3 years of organic certification processes. Then under key work package 4, we then make those organic soybean products available on the market, so they're then able to enter the supply chain. Solidaridad's engagement in the programme is very much from steps 1 to 3, and then it's handed over to ADM and others and the farmers themselves to then trade their products. Solidaridad can offer some advice there, but we don't broker any trade agreements or anything like that. So it's literally just the development side that we engage in. On cross-cutting themes, we would, on farmer income, for example, we'd expect to see improved prices for their product because it's certified as organic. And then there's also a strong component of women's empowerment through focused skills training in organic farming practices. And we've got some specific techniques on those as well. So next slide, please. So with regards to farmer enrolment and trainer of trainers, I've touched on that already, but I just thought I'd reinforce it with just running through the slides on the different work packages. As I said, we work with TraceNet on the farmer diaries, and we have that network of lead farmers. And we've now also managed to enroll 2,000 farmers on the programme. So we've hit our target in terms of the enrolment process. Next slide, please. With regards to the development of IEC materials in local language specifically, this also comes under work package 2, and this is this gives you an example of what the training manuals and some of the paperwork looks like in terms of being able to inform the farmers, all translated into local language. And then there are proactive training programs as well, where they're taught in the field as well. But this just gives you an example of the training materials that are available. And then there's training on preparation methods for organic soil improvements and biological control of pests. One example is the use of neem seed kernel extract, which is quite useful for rusts. Then we've also got use of biofertilizers in soy production. There's also training material on crop rotation in soybean and intercropping soybean with other crops. And then also there's a big piece on soil sampling and testing as well. So we could go to the next slide, please. With regards to the farmer trainings, the farmers are registered. So then those training programs are then set up for those particular farmers. We set that up through the establishment of learning groups to facilitate hands-on experience as well. And this builds towards the additional infrastructure that we're setting up. For example, those farmer learning groups and the lead farmers, they move to the clusters of these farmer interest groups, and then those farmer interest groups that are taken from the registered farming clusters. So the farmers are clustered. They're all registered for their training. We set up within those clusters farmer interest groups, and then those farmer interest groups are our lead people that go forward for farm producer organisation leadership, and then hopefully out of that whole process, with directors having then been put forward for those farmer producer organisations, we're then able to set up farmer producer companies. And the 200 lead farmers play a key role in helping that progression and that professionalisation in terms of farming communities and being able to access and certify organic certification and certify their farms. So next slide, please. We've also set up a network of 80 demonstration plots, as I mentioned, as part of the work package 2, this whole training infrastructure. And these demonstration plots have been set up in the different clusters, and they're mobilised very much by the 200 lead farmers. and they're used also for the soil sampling that I mentioned in order to analyse soil nutrients and carbon. And if we go to the next slide, there's just a table there that shows you the kind of information that we're getting from the soil analysis report. So we report on things like soil carbon, and then various nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, and any metals like copper or manganese or anything like that, and additional minerals. So yeah, so that's the analysis report. So that's all still part of this infrastructure, this educational infrastructure that's set up on the under Work Package 2. Then if we go, also we have under Work Package 2, part of this network infrastructure, we have this, we have a series of farmer field days where they're able to, we have these field trips organised, and they're able to share practice, good management practice with their peers, demonstrate what they're up to in terms of the developments that they're making on organic certification. Any particular farmer who's doing particularly well, you know, they're able to impart that knowledge, and their peers are able to learn from them as well. So that's all part of this sort of ongoing process of the training infrastructure provision. So if we go to the next slide, which is on the NPOP training, Work Package 3 then is very much around preparing farmers for organic certification, and that, as I said, that's against the national programme for organic production that's operated by the Ministry of Commerce and Industries in India, and the actual organic certification will be done under the NPOP programme. And the NPOP programme requires a 2-year conversion period in order to be certified against NPOP. So the farmers are actually certified in year 3 of the programme. So currently under the programme, we've got 842 farmers are in year 2 of the conversion period, and 1,180 farmers are in year 1. And as you can see, it's obviously been a slow pickup, and then it's obviously speeding up in terms of the farmers that are expressing an interest to join the organic programme. And then the NPOP training programme, the photographs that you can see here, that's an example of a 1-day training programme that we ran, which was in Karnataka, and it was within the State Seed and Organic Certification Agency in Dharwad State. And the activities that were included in that training were things like on-site inspection, so sort of with the auditing process, on-site inspection, field visits, risk assessment, assessment of producer systems, review of records and documentation check, interview of responsible persons, and then preparation of the inspection report, and evaluation and review of any non-conformities and corrective action requests. So this sort of testing of the auditing process and the requirements that come with that are very useful for the farmers to sort of get their heads around and realise what the sort of common non-conformities and corrective action requests are likely to be as well, and where they can then head off that risk of that happening. To enhance the credibility of the certification system for organic products, it has as I said, a user-friendly web-based traceability system called TraceNet. That's how it will be used, and then the internal control system that's put in place with indicators in line with the NPOP traceability framework creates a database that can be maintained and checked for things like group certification purposes, which are obviously useful in this case. And then the improved farming activities can be monitored by conducting internal audits by trained field executives in each crop season, and that happens at least twice a year, which is an NPOP requirement. And in addition to this, ADM also will provide the farmers with magnetic IDs linked to the farmers' database. So, I know Mace was alluding to alignment with India in terms of ProTerra certification, and the major difference here between NPOP and ProTerra is NPOP doesn't certify GM or non-GM. So farmers certified against NPOP obviously can be certified against ProTerra, but would obviously have to meet the requirements of the no GM policy. But they're basically prepped pretty well by year 3 of the training. So then also under Work Package 3, we have then trial audits. So EcoCert agency undertook the external audit in July, and this covered the farmers that were in year 2 of the conversion to the organic program. So this is actually, so it's a trial audit, but it's obviously part of that sort of formal process of then getting to NPOP certification. And this identifies any issues or problems that they might encounter, and it assesses their readiness for certification. So that works very well. So that's I think I forgot to say next slide, so I'm hoping we're on the right one. I'll just check. Yes, well done. Thank you. So we now go to next slide, which is project monitoring and support visits. So one of the things about the farmer engagement is the importance of maintaining proactive engagement, support, and visibility on these kinds of programs. You know, it's a hand-holding process for these farmers, because a lot of them have a complete lack of awareness, or had a complete lack of awareness of the potential benefits of organic certification, and also the tools and methods that would be required. So it's that journey that they go on. There is, you know, the importance of that proactive engagement on from all members of the partnership is pretty key. So that's been very helpful in this engagement, the strong support of those different partners, from the Indian Ministry, from ADM, and obviously ourselves, Solidaridad. Right, next slide, please. Now, none of these programs come without challenges, and so I put some of the key challenges down here. Clearly, COVID was an elephant in the room in the early stages of the project, and we had to adapt by having weekly reviews in terms of the COVID situation. And in order to be able to continue to make progress with the program, some of our team members were actually moved to the field. But now we've as you can see from the fact that we've got everybody enrolled now, team has pretty much more or less caught up in terms of progress with the program. One of the other challenges is when you're moving into new geographies, you have a sort of lead-in period that's required in order to build trust with the farmers. And Solidaridad had to do that, so that delayed things also slightly in terms of some of the challenges that we encountered. But they were overcome by getting into local festivals and trade fairs and those kinds of things, and local village community events, and having stands set up there so that we could talk to the farmers and gauge interest. And the state authorities were also very helpful in terms of helping facilitate outreach, etc. As I mentioned already, lack of awareness is a key issue. So the potential benefits of organic farming sometimes aren't very clear to farmers when they're sort of set in their sort of production processes, and also there was the lack of technical support in those subject areas as well. So that made it very difficult to engage farmers initially, but we overcame that again through some of the methods that I've talked about, and the fact that we were able to make sort of certain business cases to those farmers as well. Climate change has been a contributor. If you look at the infection of soybean plants by rust, so climate change has been a key factor in exacerbating that. Very, very heavy rains in October, November last year. And so the training that we also then put in some adaptive training as well, in terms of highlighting the importance of adoption of rust-resistant soybean varieties, which were released by the state authorities in Darwad, UAS, and then also training programs that recommended the use of biopesticides for the management of soybean rust disease. In addition to use of required, in addition to as part of the challenge, in addition to the fact that use of required quantity of organic inputs like vermicompost, dean and neem, etc., and green manures, they also have to be certified. So that was under number 5, the lack of available quality organic inputs. If you're going to be certifying your soybean production, you have to be using certified organic inputs. That was one of the sort of regular non-conformities that was identified, is that at the last minute they would forget that the organic inputs that they needed to put in had to also be certified, and there's a general lack of availability of some of those. And also, because they're not mass produced at the moment, they can also be more expensive than industrially produced agrochemicals. So that can increase the cost of cultivation. So those are some of the challenges that that we encounter as we're going along with the project. And so there are also other processes looking at mass production of organic inputs that can also be certified, and trying to get that infrastructure set up as well. And then setting up farmer producer companies, as I mentioned, getting them through that stepwise approach to setting up a company with the engagement of the lead farmers and working through the clusters to set up these lead organizations, etc. So that's a time-consuming process. But in actual fact, one company has already been set up, and we're now focusing on the second one. So we are making progress there. But that whole process, in order to professionalize the certification process, is takes time. And then, as I said, farmers and the need to follow use of certified organic inputs. So that was another, as I said, that was another challenge in terms of progressing the certification process. So if we move to the last slide, so key success criteria as a result of the project, and what are required in order to make the project a success. As I said, key thing, I'll pick maybe 3 out of these, but a key one was ability to gain trust and understanding with the local farming communities, and general awareness raising on organic soybean cultivation in the local communities and local farming events. That was pretty key. Being able to make the business case to farmers to join the programme, clearly having a clear market demand with ADM in the background was extremely helpful. And then also talking to farmers and getting them to think creatively around the cost debate on things like organic inputs. You can potentially lower input costs and increase farmer income and crop diversification opportunities through mass production of biofertilizers and biopesticides, etc. And then there's also the indirect benefits, the potential indirect benefits to farmers in terms of health improvement, water security, reducing pollution, and improving soil health. So that's another aspect. If we look at provision of women-only training programs, that was another, well, is an ongoing key success criteria. So we found that women were much more likely to attend the programs and get more from the training also if we ran these women-only training programs. And then, as I said, effective project management structure is pretty key as well. So that whole piece around the professionalisation of the smallholder farmer organisations is very important in order to be able to maintain certification performance as well. So that's the component there. And there's as I said, there's a number of other success criteria, but I'll call it a day there. Final slide, just to say, well, this is a nice photograph of the ADM and Solidaridad staff in Karnataka. Any additional information, please feel free to reach out. In actual fact, the expert on the whole programme is Dr. Suresh Motwani, who was unable to make today, but he's responsible for the overall implementation of the programme in India. And so, but you can filter your any questions or anything like that. You can filter those through me, and anything I can't answer, I'll pick up with Suresh. So thanks very much.
Wonderful, thank you so much. This really helped us to understand also the importance and the complexity of such programs. And thank you, Beatrix, for your insights and sharing those with us. Before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to also share some key issues, major issues that we identified during the farm audit, which I think would be a great addition to Beatrix's slides. So what general challenges do we see? There are only a few companies when we look at the Indian reality that control most of the exports. So the international big companies that gather all the hundreds of thousands of bags, as Stefan mentioned, and really take that flow, export it to other continents, such as, for example, Europe. There is a limited flow of information exactly because of these bottlenecks. And yeah, traceability, transparency, it is really one of the key barriers today to fully understand also impacts and how we can change that. So the complexity is really high. I think also Beatrix showed that very well, how many different challenges and also factors you have to consider during such a program in India. So the high complexity, we couldn't mention that enough, and also the number of farms and bags, as Stefan said, in the supply chain. So that increases all, and adds another additional complexity to the whole thing. The need of training women, especially the role of women in the supply chain is important to also understand and address accordingly. And record keeping. Sometimes writing, level of school is can also create a barrier in participating in such programs and as such making informed decisions. Where are we today as ProTerra in smallholder with our smallholder interpretation? So we started in 2020 in India. As I mentioned at the beginning, for India, the size of the farms of 2 hectares or less has been defined as smallholder. In other realities, it may be different depending on the local needs and realities. And we had last year around 80,000 farms. Now it's heading towards 100,000 farms. The goal is to reach the 300,000 farms of ADM. So it is continuously increasing. Companies are really understanding that there is a need for more transparency, for additional training for such programs that were mentioned also in the other presentations. What are really because I mentioned the general issues we see, what is really during the audits, what is the major issue is really record keeping for everything, seed, harvest yields, also the use of protective equipment is something we often see and have to document as non-conformity during the audits. And also, formal pay register records not maintained, not for workers, seasonal workers, so that is also an issue. Many cases, they use own seed for next year, but there is often no proper test of fertility done, so that may affect also the quality. But altogether, really, we can underline record keeping as one of the main challenges today. However, a positive thing is that we saw that after farmer smallholders enroll in such programs, such as the ProTerra or other programs mentioned here, after the second full year, we see that more than 50% of the farmers really started keeping records and documentation in a more structured way. So that also shows that what effect training has on site, and when they understand the need and the advantages of such activities or actions that they have to do, they really try and collaborate and improve and also see the benefits of such. So that's really important. But difficulty is really at the beginning to convince them that this is needed, get engaged. After you convince the bigger companies of the necessity of such programs, the next step is really how do you convince your smallholder farms. They need to also dedicate time, resources for the visits, for the audits, for the interviews. So that is sometimes also a challenge that we have to understand when working with the Indian reality. Communication. Always an issue, no matter if a small or big company, same with the farmers. It's a huge country. There are communication barriers in certain parts of the country. So it's really crucial that you have training material in local languages, that the auditors speak their language. And if that's not the case, an interpreter is needed, somebody who works along with the farms and helps them navigate through the systems and programs. There are many family members engaged also in these programs and on the farm's activities. So they have limited resources. So time is also a challenge when engaging in programs. But as mentioned, once they are convinced, they also see the benefits and then improve a lot very quickly. And that's why this continuous improvement is needed and works on the ground increasing the indicators that you need year by year. So that was from our side. Very quickly, we have 3 minutes left for Q&A, and I have some questions here. The first one is the digitalization. That is a crucial topic in the last few years. So the question is, are there any apps used or special solutions to register and document yield or other data from the farmers? Both of you, feel free to answer. Stefan or Beatrix?
I could actually, I'm not, I got my colleagues from India in the audience. Can they answer if I want them to answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
And unmute yourself if,
Vanika? Let's see if that works.
Hello. Hi, Stefan. I would want you to repeat the question again for me, please.
Yeah.
If you use, you know, because of digitalization and the complexities we just mentioned, also multiple levels during such programs, the question is, or if you use apps or different tools to register, you know, farm data, yields, and other information.
Right. So at this point in time, I'm excited to share that we at ADM India are in the process of implementing a farm app, which is a digital tool to track and keep records in a digital manner. This is an application which is called as Acre Square Plus, and it is developed by Cropin Solutions, which is basically a SaaS-based company based out of India. And with this application, we have recently launched this digital initiative tool. And by next year, we are planning that all of our ProTerra farmers are registered on this application and they get to access the knowledge sharing, training platform, training sessions through the application. So this will actually help us a lot in transmitting the information easily and for those farmers to keep a track record of their documents in the application without having a hassle of keeping the hard copies. So that's definitely one tool we are implementing at this moment in India to reduce this issue actually.
Yes, and I was just going to add, we also have farmer apps that where we can register data, etc., and the farmers can access advice on technical inputs and those kinds of things too. And obviously there's TraceNet as well, which is the program, which is the one that we're working with in the program as well. But we have our own farmer apps too. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Another question, I think this is to direct more to Stefan. Yeah, because of the complexity of the bags and 50 kilo one, you know, packaging, how do you deal with the different quality of the delivered beans?
How do we deal with the different quality?
Probably my understanding of the question, you know, how do you manage fluctuations of quality?
Well, Amrendra, do you want to say something to that?
Yeah. So when we are buying from the growers, we have a fixed quality parameter. So the specs are already designed in that way, and then we are buying if that is meeting our specs. So there is a variation, but it's not huge variation. And most of the farmers are growing a pretty similar variety in that area. So variety wise, it's pretty similar. It's just say a moisture or some foreign matter that may differ, but in total the variety is fairly similar.
Wonderful.
And I can just add from the European experience, we in Europe, we're sourcing from many different areas, but an Indian crush plant will basically source around their areas. So you usually will have a very stable quality. It'll be very similar. Whereas if we take different qualities to Europe, we'll have a lot of fluctuations just by using different origins.
Yeah, in our case, the draw area is say 150 kilometers. So yeah, that is how we are sourcing. Max.
Thank you so much. I have a question here for Beatrix. You mentioned soil analysis. Do you actually see an improvement, for example, in soil carbon levels over the years?
Well, it's quite early days to sort of be able to report improvements, but historically, yes, in terms of the methodologies that we're using, yes, we would expect to see significant improvements actually, and it is something that is also something that we're looking at in terms of more generally as an organisation, in terms of how you potentially might also be able to monetize things like soil carbon, etc. So that's also something to think about in terms of income diversification. So yeah. Yes, it's an important one.
Thank you. The last question here, how we check the implementation of ProTerra requirements at smallholders level. Do they have audits? And yes, which number? Yes, indeed, there is, and I'll answer that, sorry. There is indeed audits taking place, so you have the possibility to certify a farmer on a farmer level, or you have also the possibility of certifying the crushing plant, and then a sample of the supplying farm, so the smallholder farms, will be verified under the scope of the certification of the crushing plant. There is a sampling methodology defined. We will send out the links also together with the recording and the slides. So you can also check out the details, and yeah, contact us please if you have any further questions. We ran out of time. I would like to thank you again for your participation, interesting questions, and yeah, for staying with us, and especially our presenters today from ADM and Solidaridad for sharing their insights and interesting slides with us. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you have further questions, please reach out to us under the given email and the well-known email addresses. And yeah, have a wonderful day, rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.